Hi, everyone. This is Jay Ellenby, Safe Harbors Business Travel, and thank you for joining us again. And this is actually our number 10 Travel Experts video series, so thank you very much for being with us. Today, I'm really excited to share with you a fantastic person, good friend, in Louise Miller. She's managing partner of Americas of Areka Consulting. So, Louise, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to be here.
So we've been seeing a lot of things going on over the past few months, but as really the spirit of this video series is really education, is educating our clients, educating the community, and I can't think of a better person to talk about this. So, Louise, if you could take maybe a minute or two, talk about your role at Areka Consultant and what you do and how you help your clients.
Great, thanks, Jay. I've been with Areka Consulting now for about 2 years. Prior to that, I spent more than 20 reporting to the CEO of a major TMC, travel management company. And in my role at Areka, I help mostly Fortune 100 companies all the way to the Fortune 500 with their travel programs. We're an independent firm, and so we do sourcing and program management for pretty much every category. I would say that the most exciting thing about my role is that it is focused on education. We're on webinars every day somewhere. Of course, we all reminisce about the times where these things were face-to-face, but video and web is the best we can all do right now, right, Jay? So anyway, we market our services through education, and we're very, very active with the various media as well as associations in the endeavor to promote education. And really during this whole pandemic, we've spent at least 50% of our time participating in those kinds of groups. So really excited to be here and to talk more about what we see and what buyers and travelers are telling us.
So Louise, thank you. Your title, Managing Partner Americas. Talk about your area that you cover, your territory, your region.
So for the most part, about 70% of managed programs originate from North America, Central Europe, UK, and a few markets in Asia Pacific. The other 20% emerge from smaller and medium-sized markets. We have quite a diverse client base. We have, of the 20 or so odd projects we have going on right now, a handful of them are based out of Latin America. So it's interesting to work with the companies that are based in Latin America because the challenges they're facing, even before COVID, sometimes are quite different. One example is we're kind of spoiled here in the USA. Our travel agency or our online booking tool, we can get all the content we want in one place. In many markets in Latin America, it's much harder. The airlines don't participate the same way in the systems that are used by the travel counselors. And it's much harder if you're just a traveler or an arranger to find the content you need to get your trip booked. It's a lot trickier. So anyway, we enjoy working with our clients based in Latin America because they have challenges that are somewhat different than the ones that are based in Central Europe and North America.
Oh, great, thank you. So you've been traveling, I believe.
Yes.
To some extent. Can you share your experience and how that went for you?
Yeah. I think that for most people, visiting friends or family is going to be their first trip. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was no different. Some of my trips were to visit friends and family. And, my family spread out all over the US, and even my son's fiance is based in Mexico. And I have a student from Brazil that has been with us now for 4 years. So we have quite the international family. So far, my first business trip is tomorrow, actually. I'm heading to Boston for a multiple-day meeting with some innovative tech companies and some of the topics we're going to talk about later in this session. And my experience has been outstanding, but it's different than what you expect. My old life as a road warrior was that I relied on TSA PreCheck and my airline status and clubs with awesome space and service to get me through each trip efficiently, because consultants don't usually stop working ever, except to sleep. And so now it's opposite. Most of the places I go, there is no TSA line. There's not enough people to warrant them opening it. And so therefore there is a line, 20, 30 people in line. I'm not used to that. I'm used to zipping right in. Another example is, being healthy on the road and figuring out where to find healthy food. Because you can't rely on things being open the same number of hours. Even if there's outlets open in an airport, you arrive at 10 o'clock at night, there's nothing open. And the same with exercise. You can't get into the gym in a hotel because either their quota, they have a quota system where you only want to have so many people inside, and other people signed up before that was my priority. So it changes the whole way you travel. But I have to say, the airlines and hotels did an amazing job. I felt safe, I felt comfortable. Honestly, I didn't feel any different than I do going to the grocery store. Common sense. But it's just where the past 5 years, the airlines and hotels and other providers as well, certainly rental car, they just developed such robust service platforms and offerings. And now we're kind of back to basics. So, while I feel like it's efficient because the crowds are still small, it's going to tax the system once things return. And so we're going to need some of those services to be turned back on and working again. So that we can be productive en route in the whole journey, door to door.
I'm actually taking my first trip, personal trip, this weekend. So I'm leaving this Saturday, coming back Wednesday. So what you just shared, I'm looking forward to it too as well. Because I like you, TSA PreCheck, global entry, all of that clear. So I'm really curious to see how that sits, and I'll be doing my first business trip a week after that. So it's I'm looking forward to it. Besides that, we're road warriors, we're travelers, and being the fact I've been grounded for the past 3 months is mind-numbing.
It really has been difficult.
Yeah. So let's talk about COVID itself. We're here to talk about COVID. Unfortunately, I know it's an old story, but it's a reality. How has that impacted your clients, your businesses that you work with?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 or 3 different streams of activity that we're seeing with our clients. First and foremost, we developed a program called the Areka Expert Network. And basically the purpose of the Areka Expert Network is to match buyers with displaced experts. And the displaced experts volunteer 4 hours a month of their time to help a client. And for example, we'll look at a travel policy. We'll reconfigure someone's dashboard in Excel. We'll try to hook them up with other buyers or other travel management companies that have expertise that they can tap. So that's kind of our way, of giving back. And that's obviously brand new. We launched that about 6 weeks ago. The second thing that we see for sure is some of our customers don't want to rebuild their travel program in the same value chain as they were in before the COVID-19. So we see companies, small and large, looking at different types of providers, looking at what is their current TMC doing, what is their current online booking tool doing, and is that the same way that they want to emerge? Now is a good time to review and make sure you're aligned with the key suppliers in your travel value chain. And I think that companies learned, the travel managers and travelers learned a lot about their relationships in a crisis, right? And so it's really a time to step back and look at how you're doing things. And if there's just a way to do things better with your current supplier, maybe it's the travel buyer that really didn't want to make a change in terms of a process improvement because they're busy and their company's growing, it's not a priority. Well, now the TMCs and OBT companies that were giving all these great ideas before can get the attention of those buyers to actually go ahead and make changes to the program that they should have been making all along. And then kind of the last work stream that we're seeing is protectionism. Companies are looking at the ground transportation landscaping, trying to figure out, does their preferred supplier program that they have in place account for the fact that, some suppliers are having financial difficulty in filing for Chapter 11? Are they with the right airlines based upon their expected travel patterns and the massive overhaul the airlines have made in their schedules. One of my funny, but not so funny ways to describe it is, one connection is the new nonstop.
Hmm.
So, before nonstop, we could get almost anywhere nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Now I get all excited when I pull up a flight display and I only have to connect once. I think that's amazing. So we have to change our mindset. And
Right.
I think companies are really thinking about policy, duty of care, and then supplier management coming out of the pandemic. How is it going to change? So those are the main things we're working on. Another quick example of something that we're working on is we're part of a coalition of other consulting firms and innovative suppliers who are transforming the way that we dynamically manage hotel programs. So TripBan is an example of a technology that you can use for hotel analytics, not just checking for a lower rate at another point in time, but also for trying to sort out if your hotel is even complying with your discount. It used to be that we could audit the rates that we load once we negotiate them for the client, and then we're good to go. And we're just finding a lot more inconsistencies. So more robust, dynamic hotel program management. With the chains, a lot of them saying, we're not negotiating this year, we're not doing RFPs. How do you roll over a program for a customer in a way that makes sense? And I know that from conversation with you, your team's dealing with those same things. So I think there's a new way to manage hotel that's emerging from all of our businesses, not just, Areka's. But hotel is a big focus for clients in our portfolio.
Louise, you're spot on. Everything you're mentioning there, that's exactly many of the things that we're seeing as well, and also from our conversations. Travel policy, that was your first one, and that is the number one topic that we have seen with our clients. And with respect to the travel policy, first of all, we're happy to see that is, let's put this, let's face this, some companies have many different perspectives when it comes to travel policy. Some say, hey, we have to have a travel policy, put it out there. Others say, we're going to live by this travel policy, and we're going to either enforce it, mandate it, or we're just going to let it sit out there, and that 40-page travel policy we put out there, let's see if it sticks.
Right.
And our best as a TMC, our best guidance is helping clients to really put it in place and help them manage it, but yet help them keep flexibility. But I'm curious, with today's environment, what are you finding the key features that you're seeing with your clients in adjusting their travel policy today's environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, funny enough, the travel policy discussions are just coming to fruition. I think there was a lot of comparing and a lot of research, and now I'm seeing action when it comes to the travel policy. And I see three main areas. The first area is companies that still want to give their travelers a lot of empowerment because they want the traveler to want to travel. They don't want to surround them with so many rules and heavy process that travel just becomes, why do I bother? Why am I going to bother, right? And in those companies, I'm seeing ideas emerge like a checklist and a commitment that the employee signs, for example, on DocuSign. And you sign off that you understand that you've read all of the tips and tricks and policies and everything. And once you've actually signed that document, then you're allowed to book travel. And that is a pretty simple way to check the boxes for legal and HR and your employees' well-being. Mm-hmm. Because as we know, people don't always read what's in front of them, but I think people will take this seriously. And making the travel booking process and the journey enablement with the TMC and the online booking tool simple, because the travelers, really want that journey assistance now, and travel agencies, TMCs, have a big opportunity to be more of an advisor than maybe what travelers were letting us be the past 10 or so years, with things being so easy out there, and now it's harder. So I think That's the first profile of customer we see. And those are companies that are high tech, they're growing, they're not as fixated on budget control, they're fixated on growth, and they're fixated on talent. And therefore they're not fixated on heavy process, and they do something duty of care wise that is an acknowledgement and a guidance. The second type of company we see are companies that are, have to watch their budgets much more carefully. And maybe they're in a business where they have so many different types of travelers that they don't have confidence that, the travelers themselves should really be assessing the situation. And so they want to have multiple levels of approval, and sometimes all the way to the C-suite. And it's very integrated with the TMC process, for example. And as you well know, approval processes that are automated take a lot of time to develop the rules, maintain the rules. And so, but a lot of companies realize that that's the best way to manage the approval for travel and their policy. So I would say the vast majority of companies fall into, one of those two buckets. And then there's sort of one in the middle, I would guess. But then once you've decided that someone's allowed to travel and should travel, then it comes down to what are the policies that they have to follow while they travel. And I think that companies are realizing that the suppliers are really stepping up. Most hotels belong to one of 3 or 4 cleanliness standard companies that they opt into. The airlines are doing an amazing job bringing on new technology to keep things clean. So I think that's refreshing to the buyers that I talk to, that they're not going to have to build all this stuff into the contracts. It's going to happen. And it's sort of a crowdsourced type of effort to get the suppliers into these different cleanliness standards. Car rental is probably the easiest one because, 90% of the world's car rentals, other than in regulated markets like China and Russia, are done by 5 companies. Right. So when you only have 5 companies, it's much easier to figure out what standard is going to bring comfort and then subsequently bring demand. Right. So I think the car rental companies in particular are doing an awesome job. I don't see companies making their policy windows smaller. I see them having to make them larger because if, there just might not be a flight within 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So the schedule situation and the airlines are going to do their best, but I see companies instead of let's suggest to a traveler options that might be 2 hours earlier or 2 hours later. That's been the standard for 25 years, right? I see that broadened into 4 hours either way. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you're not going to have enough schedule options to even have a comparison. And I also think that the dollar threshold, when you're looking at this nonstop at 9 a.m. and this nonstop at 10 a.m., you can have a $50 threshold because they're both nonstop and they're both convenient, right? Once you're saying to people, 1 connection or 2 connections, maybe you increase that to $100 one way, and you don't really force people to take the lowest fare when the connection's 7 hours. Right. So the whole way we offer alternatives in the shopping experience is going to have to be pretty thoughtful. And the logic might be a little different for short haul, medium haul, and long haul. And so that's another point that we've been working with clients on experimenting with their online booking tool settings quite a bit because of that. So those are just some examples of, policies. And in general, I think policies are going to be traveler friendly, but also designed to protect the traveler and to help them with those early decisions to travel.
So what are you seeing, Louise, if companies put a travel policy in place, they've adapted to the new environment, but you still have leakage? You still have certain travelers who say, I'm traveling any way I want. What do you think? Is there any change in philosophy with a company to those travelers?
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on. One of the things that I find very fascinating, and there was just an article in Skift and several in Business Travel News and the company Dime about this. Basically, I see more innovation, not less, because of the pandemic. And the reason is because the past 5 years, we had so much venture capital and private equity money, and it was all about the bright, shiny new objects in companies, trip actions, for example. And what we see now is that, necessity and sustainability and things that are inevitable anyway, like blockchain, are going to drive innovation. It's not just startups. I mean, there was always other things going on behind the scenes, but these startups stole the limelight, and really they aren't the only exciting thing happening. So what I see then is travel managers are in a position to say, okay, I really want my travelers to use the TMC because I feel like I have the most control over communication, readiness, policy, and the overall service experience. But the cold hard fact is that 50% of hotels weren't being booked inside the TMC environment, and 10–15% of air isn't happening inside the TMC environment. And part of that is because the TMCs can't sell much on the ancillary front. So especially frequent travelers and road warriors, they're very attracted to that direct booking experience, particularly with the airline or big hotel chain, because they feel in control. And they can buy all the different bells and whistles and all the things their status qualifies them for are instantly visible to them. And the airlines have not always made it quite as easy for the TMCs for booking through their GDS global distribution systems, like all TMCs use. So I think travel managers are going to reinforce using the travel agency. However, I think I know because I can see the activity, they're more and more interested than ever at looking at ways to capture rogue spend. And one of the ways that's piquing new interest is a topic you and I have talked about for years now, Jay, and that is the idea that if you book on a supplier direct website and you're a Concur travel and expense customer, you can enable called Trip Link in your profile, and your company gets a copy of that booking. And it can be used by your TMC for various purposes. It can be used for expense, and it can be used to make sure that we know where you are for duty of care in the event something's happening. And I think it was scary to some buyers in the past because they felt like they were permissioning open booking. Book anywhere, it's okay, we'll catch it on the back end. But in today's day and age, we have to use every tool we have without judgment, so to speak. There are two other tools out in the market that I think are pretty cool that capture itineraries from the corporate domain. And they actually there's a way that you can actually leave the data inside the corporate network and not even take it out. And so those companies are helping identify all of the bookings that are happening outside of the designated managed channel so that the travel manager can make a choice. Am I going to try to shift those bookings to a managed channel, or am I just going to collect them and do different things with the data, gives me line of sight into spend and duty of care. So I see TMCs playing a much more important role in trying to get that leakage back. And I see these tools that we can use enabled and that the TMC and the travel buyer are cooperating to make sure those tools are in place so that we don't come back into the world of travel again, just allowing rogue spend to happen without any attempt at capturing it, but yet knowing that an absolute mandate is going to be hard for some companies.
You just cover a lot of territory, so thank you. That was great. That was great. So everything from certainly from travel policy, absolutely significant, reviewing the programs to protection. In other words, stability of suppliers, and that includes TMCs as well. We have taken a beating. There's no doubt about it. Everyone in the industry has taken a beating, and it's a matter of, okay, who is structured well enough and supporting their clients well enough to be out the other side. And I'm happy to say that I think we're in a good position there. But certainly we could all even predict of where some suppliers may be, whether it be airlines, car, hotel, TMCs, what other suppliers may be. And even technology companies, where are they going to be? Great definition in regard to travel policy. And in breaking it down between the two different clients, whether it be budget or empowerment. You know, as I mentioned earlier, Tamara spoke on a previous episode where we talked about travel policies, you know, specifically about that, because that has been a big discussion for us, and we're happy about that. You know, that is something that we always want to talk travel policies, as we look at that as a backbone. That is a backbone to a travel management program, and
Absolutely.
and you know, how do you make it so where it is simple? How do you make it so it's simple? You know, and I love the idea about a DocuSign that people will read off of it. They've read, understood the document itself, but also how do you incorporate it into a system, whether it be an online booking system or even when it's working with an agent. Okay, let's shift a little bit, Louise. Let's talk a little bit about, all right, when are companies going to be really traveling again? And what's going to be that trigger? What are you hearing that trigger is going to be that's going to give the confidence for companies and travelers?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is that there is so much information out there. And, you know, when we're talking with clients, we try to first separate the different types of information, who's putting information out there and why, and try to figure out which source of information you should use to make your plan for return to travel. Some of them are just sentiment, confidence building type surveys that are put out there by suppliers or associations to build confidence, and that's great. But we have to be super careful of those kinds of forecasts. I mean, what I'm hearing from, you know, the experts, the big consulting firms that are spending millions on this research, and they're totally neutral. Companies like Areka, totally neutral. What we believe is that business travel will be somewhere between 10 and 15%, 20 at the most, of 2019 levels between September and November. I think that's the best we can hope for business travel. And obviously, one of the reasons that percent is low is because of the shift. I mean, with so much domestic travel, the spend is going to be smaller. Sure, transactions might be a little higher than that, but really these companies need revenue. And so that's why we're focusing mostly on revenue projections, not transactions. And then we're feeling like returning to the office, certainly the extra large companies, the large travel spenders in the world, most of them aren't returning to the office till next year. And that could even get pushed back further if there's not progress towards a vaccine and if the spikes continue. But assuming we have expected small spikes that kind of die out over the summer, assuming that there's progress on herd immunity and vaccine, we believe next year, first quarter, 25% of the volume of 2019 in terms of spend, a little more than that on a transaction basis. Then we're thinking 35% for Q2, and then the back half of 2021, 50%. And, you know, of course, it might not play out exactly with those increments, but if we're predicting any more than that, I think we're being really aggressive. You know, and there's all these debates over, you know, is travel permanently reduced, this and that. I mean, I think we're going to see something that we've never seen before emerge. And I think that no one's ever going to go back to the way they did it before. But, you know, suppliers have to have some sort of revenue projection. TMCs need some sort of idea of what kind of travel spend is going to return so everyone can plan their business, right? So those are the best predictions that we can make right now. I don't see anything happening that would drive those up because, you know, a vaccine this year is pretty unlikely, at least anytime soon. And most of the things that would happen would probably bring that forecast down a little bit. A lot of the predictions that we're making look similar in terms of spend and long haul travel in 5 years. So that's about where we are right now.
Louise, let me take you back. You mentioned the resources. I know, Areka, you have some consulting products or resources. Are there other resources that you could recommend?
Yeah, yeah. So we look at the public Tableau dashboard published by BCG, Boston Consulting Group.
Yeah.
It's the single most comprehensive tool out there. What is not on the open market is forecasting.
Right.
Any type of detailed forecasting is, I would guess at this point in time, is going to be sold by those big companies that are qualified to make those kind of forecasts. I know that different travel associations are limited. They can't do forecasting because of the airlines are publicly held companies, the GDS are publicly held companies. But Areka is also looking at acquiring data that separates corporate from leisure, at least to a large degree, so that we can help our clients with better forecasting as we emerge. Because a lot of the stats that are shown out there are good, they're positive signs, but a lot of it's leisure, visit friends and family. And again, that's great. But for those of us who spend most of our time in corporate travel, we need to know both. We need to understand both trends, and we need to understand how demand is emerging for corporate travel, not just on the business travel side.
Right.
So that's what we're predicting at this moment. Obviously very hopeful that only good things happen from here, so that those predictions get better, not worse. But at least if we deal with them and we're prepared, then that's the best we can do for the return to travel. But looking at when companies are opening their offices, I would say is the number one thing, other than just pure COVID stats.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about what's it going to look like on the other side. You've alluded to that in a few different levels, between the airlines and the hotels, car, and shared services. In other words, Lyft and Uber and so on, and even Airbnb. If you take those different segments, what do you think? I know I threw a lot at you there. What's your opinion about how they're going to look like on the other side?
Yeah. So let's start with the airlines. My view is that there will be some competitive routes, short haul, and some affordable airfares for leisure travelers. I think you're going to see big changes in the way the airlines construct their fare rules, and certain elements will be in place, like the Saturday night stay, for example, so that leisure travelers can still fly and it's still somewhat affordable for them. Generally, for business travelers, we're anticipating skyrocketing prices because the demand the airlines are going to be conservative, bringing capacity and schedule back. So therefore, the demand is going to exceed the supply, and that's going to drive prices up for quite a while. Long haul, over 10 hours, big price increases. I don't think their mindset of bringing the prices down is going to stimulate demand on a 14-hour flight. I don't think that's what's going to drive business travel. And then I think for medium haul, maybe 3 to 10 hours, you're going to have such a mix. Over the Atlantic is probably still going to be somewhat competitive. It's highest traffic, highest profit route in the world. Coast to coast in the US, you're going to see some competition because everybody wants that business. But generally, it's going to be hard, and airfares are going to be higher, and that's going to stifle the demand a bit for air travel. Now, that being said, it's going to be a buyer's market for hotel for the most part. So before the pandemic hit, CB Richard Ellis and other experts were predicting market softening and a 2-year buyer's market anyway, after multiple years of increased prices and occupancy. And there's a handful of places like San Jose and a handful of others that would be an exception. But for the most part, we were heading into a buyer's market anyway. So now you're going to see city center properties with great lower rates because of, the more concentrated the population, the higher the risk to travel there. You're going to see the roadside hotels maybe getting a little more price than not taking as much of a discount as the inner city hotels. But enjoying decent occupancy. I mean, I've stayed quite a few room nights because I was actually in quarantine, so I could see my grandchildren. And every night the hotel was about 80% full, and this was in April.
Hmm.
So you have people going by rail, you have people going by car, you have the food industry hauling things around to get food to different places. So hotels are going to be a mix, but generally very much a buyer's market for the next 2 years. Car rental prices are
Before
skyrocketing.
you leave there, Louise, let me ask you real quick then. We're speaking about hotels. How about the meeting market? You know, meetings at hotels and events. That's been very severe on that segment of hotel business.
Yeah. I see a situation where we need a vaccine before we can really predict the comeback of meetings. That's my view on it.
Mm-hmm.
We're much earlier in terms of figuring out how meetings are going to occur. And, you know, obviously there's a great advancements in technology, so you can do a lot more with virtual meetings. So I think meetings are going to take a very long time, and I don't even think we can begin to make projections until we have a vaccine, unfortunately.
I would agree. Cars, what do you think about auto?
Oh, so car rental prices are skyrocketing. And essentially they're limiting one ways. I've also rented quite a few cars in the past 3 months. And for example, this week I was trying to rent a car to go from Newark to Boston because I didn't want to take the connection. And I couldn't get a rental car company to give me a one-way rental. Now it's a holiday weekend and I get that.
Sure.
I also tend to rent a lot in the Silicon Valley and Central Valley areas because I have customers and family there. And I'm always picking up in one place and trying to drop off another. It's very cost prohibitive to take a one-way rental car right now. And just the daily rental car rates are extraordinarily high versus what they were before the pandemic. So car rental up, airline up, rail will go up, especially with the movements in Europe to take rail instead of planes, and hotel down. So that's my prediction.
Okay, how about shared services?
Yeah, so I'm a very big Airbnb, Uber user. Always have been since the inception. I would say that Airbnb should, in theory, be strong on the return to travel. And the reason is because, you know, you're not walking into a big hotel lobby, you're not on an elevator crowded of people. So some people are going to find comfort in being in a private setting, maybe taking some of their own disinfectant. I have a mix of hotel and Airbnb coming in July. I'm away for almost 3 weeks, and I'm doing about half in each camp. And I see that cancellation policies may impact it a little bit because Airbnb, they tend to have most of the units have more strict cancellation penalties. So travelers who aren't 100% positive they're going somewhere may shy away from an Airbnb as they did even before COVID. And to me, I'm still a big Uber fan, and I'll still be a loyal Uber user. I find that, you know, when your trip's longer and you're stressed and you're getting used to a new normal, nothing like then having to get in a rental car, at least for me. I'd like to avoid it. So if I'm going short haul, just to from, I'm going to take Uber. And I've taken probably 7 or 8 Ubers just in the past. So I think Uber will come back really strong. I think the BCG customer sentiment survey that's on that Tableau website I described before, it says the last time I looked, 58% of people feel comfortable using ride hail. Mm-hmm. 8%. That's a pretty good number, I think. And
Louise, you mentioned BCG, so the Boston Consulting Group resource. That website was?
If you just put in a Google search, Boston Consulting Group COVID-19 Tableau page.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, let's talk about travel management companies, us, people like Safe Harbors. You know, what's that model going to look like? What's pricing going to look like? What's technology, duty of care, global, and I guess if anything, There are always disruptors out there. There's always somebody new who thinks they can do it better, faster, cheaper, and it may look a little different. But how do you think we're going to look like?
Yeah, I think that when we think about 100 to 150 markets where corporate travel is common and happens, I think you're going to see some challenges, because in some of those third world countries, there's going to be a lot more insolvency. I mean, I'm super hopeful that in the big markets, if companies need to merge to stay healthy, okay, that'll happen. I'm not sure I see a lot of companies just, boom, going insolvent in countries that have business-friendly laws and a great community spirit, like the UK and France and Germany and the US and Canada and all the G8 type markets. So I do see some consolidation, and I see some actual cease of operations in some of the third tier markets. So what we tell our customers to do is to try to plan to centralize your service as a backup. And I know you already do this for customers, so you know what I'm talking about. So if you have 4 or 5 countries where the partner or your TMC that you're using can't help you anymore, the fastest thing to do is to pull those transactions into a big country like the US or the UK, depending on where you're headquartered. And there are ways to deal with the currency and tax issues. They're not insurmountable. And so having that backup plan, I think, is super important. Again, more for third world markets. In addition, we are seeing some new interest in subscription pricing. Now, the catch-22 with subscription pricing is, just because you call it a subscription and not a transaction fee doesn't mean the company is going to want to pay if they're not doing any work. So what we're seeing is monthly minimums coming into play. So whether you stick with transaction fee or whether you switch to a subscription fee type model, a monthly minimum makes a lot of sense for both parties. That would be how software as a service contracts work a lot of times. And that way the TMC is not being, is being paid to keep the lights on, so to speak. You've implemented someone's program, you have all the data, you have to sit there and be ready to go. Where is your maintenance fee to keep you going during periods of travel stoppages? It used to be that, companies would just say, here's how much my volume is, give me a price. And today I see a much more robust model where the prices can survive big changes in volume, and monthly minimum helps preserve the relationship between the two. I think a lot of companies need help trying to sort out how to budget for this type of situation, but the mechanisms are already there. They already buy services like this. It's just shifting the mindset for the TMC service. A model that I like for mid-sized companies is where you just pay a management fee out of your headquarters that gets allocated out with all your other central service costs to your business stakeholders, departments, cost centers, like you would your travel manager or like you would your expense reporting group, right? It just goes into corporate overhead. And then travelers pay a point of sale fee that's much lower.
Gotcha.
And that way, if there's travel demand reduction, you don't get as many transaction fees, but the monthly management fee doesn't change.
Right.
For larger companies who pay for travel centrally and they don't even use transaction fees, it's actually easier for them. They can figure out whether subscription or transaction is better. They're issuing a central PO. They're allocating the cost internally to their business units, and they can just scale that PO back to the monthly minimum. So there are a surprising number of companies out to bid right now for TMC. There are not a surprising number trying to come up with new commercial models with their TMC to build a healthy relationship coming out of COVID. So there's quite a flurry of activity, and also some of the CEOs of the TMCs have been speaking in the press lately about different financial models, and I think everyone's intentions are good. The thing that people don't want to talk about is that, before the pandemic, the average global TMC that was operating in more than just 1 or 2 countries, they were subsidized 50 to 70% by supplier revenue. And that's okay. But that means the corporate was only paying 30% of the real cost. And so now that's flipping around for the next couple of years. There's going to be a giant lag in supplier revenue because they're usually paid in arrears. And customers are going to take a price increase for a little while until the TMCs can get that revenue subsidy, back up. And that also ties to the distribution conversation we were having earlier, where the airlines have tried very hard to get corporate customers to book direct. And I think they'll continue to do that. And I think that's going to be a good move for some companies. And for the TMCs, it's very exciting because think of a world where we have blockchain technology enabled. The blockchain is facilitating the single version of the truth of the trip between the booking made directly on the supplier site to the airline clearinghouse, like in the US, it's called ARC, and back to the company's ERP system. And the travel agency can permission in through the blockchain and service a direct booking. So I'm super excited about that because we always knew the value proposition for TMCs is going to grow into new things over time. And that's a particularly exciting one because we have the age-old problem. The traveler booked direct, they call you. They don't care that they book direct. They want your staff to help them, right? How many times have we heard this? And now you'll be able to, if you just have permission to get into the blockchain to touch those direct bookings. So that's I'm particularly excited about.
It really is. It really is. And that's completely, that's a topic we could drive down for another half hour or an hour. And it is very interesting. And everything you just said, one thing that kind of hits me, and even as we speak with prospective clients today, when you mention all the RFPs, and we're very active with that as well, in speaking with prospective clients, they'll come in and they'll say, yeah, we, just for the sake of numbers, we do $5 million annually, or let's just say $1 million annually. Well, we know you're not doing that today. That's based on 2019 numbers. What's your recommendation? What's the reality to that?
So that's why I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're working on securing data that will tell us the difference in the change in business travel demand versus the change in leisure travel demand. Mm-hmm. And so we have a forecasting model that we use, but it's a pretty simple premise. If you're a smaller or medium-sized business, we just take their prior patterns and adjust. So for example, if they were 40% long haul before, they're not going to be 40% long haul in the first year, right? So we take the top markets, we look at the change in demand in those top markets every week, and we lay that over the customer's top markets from prior year with the international ones subtracted. You can predict the demand, and you might have to lay over a couple of business conditions like, why would they be different than the average company, And for 80% of companies, the answer is they're not. So you can just use the straight up forecast, and it's pretty valid. But then for 20% of companies, they're an NGO or they're a pharma, biotech, they're an oil company. So they have keep the lights on type of travel, or they're directly involved in the COVID-19 recovery. So their demand's going to be a little higher. What kind of workforce do they have? Is it a pretty young workforce, a lot of kids at home, don't want to take it back to their kids, they're really hesitant to travel? Or is it a lot of baby boomers like us who, maybe are still want to be responsible, but we're a little more willing to get on the road because we've been traveling for so many years and have seen various, things happen. So I think a month ago or 2 months ago, if you'd have asked, I would say, oh, it's really impossible to predict. But now I'm starting to see, and the buyers that we work with are starting to see a path towards forecasting.
Gotcha. Louise, been fantastic. And then this is longer than we normally do, but you've been a wealth of information. Your feedback has been fantastic. And the topics that you're discussing are ones that I hope we can chat about again, if you don't mind. Love to get back on and have another conversation, because such as blockchain, that can take us down a completely different path, and it's exciting stuff. I think you have a meeting in 1 minute. I heard a pop-up, so I want to make sure I want to respect your time. But thank you so much, Louise. You've been fantastic. I really do appreciate your time, and And everybody out there, we'll be back again next week and with another topic. So, Louise, thank you.
You're welcome, Jay. Thanks. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.